Hello, I'm Mark Dury from the Melbourne School of Theology, and I'm talking today with Dr. Daniel Shayesteh, who's an Iranian Christian and was formerly in Iran a politician. Where we have lots of people who wonder what's happening in Iran and how to make sense of these events that we're seeing in the media. And so we're having a chat with Daniel today to learn more about what it's like for people in Iran and what's happening with Iran. What does the future hold? So, Daniel, it's great to be talking with you. You were born and raised in Iran as a Muslim, but you came to know Jesus. Are there many Iranian Muslims who are turning to Christ?
Thanks, Mark. Wonderful to be with you. Yes, there are many, many Iranians who have given their hearts to the Lord, and many of them also are coming to the Lord because of the disillusionment they faced in Iran.
Would you say it's thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands? How many is many?
It's obviously hundreds of thousands, but there are some reports, they say it might be even between 1 million and 7 million in the last 45 years. So we don't know the exact number, but we can say hundreds of thousands.
Oh, that's amazing. I understand in 1979, a big change happened in Iran, which people call the Iranian Islamic Revolution. How old were you and what happened then? What was that about?
I was 25 years old when the revolution took place in 1979. And the major reason for Ayatollah that he didn't speak about it very directly in that time, and we discovered it later, was his opposition to the king of Iran for accepting Israel as a legitimate country. And so that was the major reason. I think, it's not thinking, it is obvious now that another reason really was the American president, Jimmy Carter, that in that time they were afraid that Iran could fall into the hands of Russian communism, just like Afghanistan. So they supported hard-line Muslims, including Ayatollah Khomeini, to run the country in place of Shah.
So the Shah fled the country, I guess.
Yeah, Shah fled the country because the protests were huge, and he didn't want to kill many people. Some people were killed, but eventually he left the country, and country fell into the hands of Ayatollah and us revolutionaries.
So Islam became a theocratic state, governed by
Exactly.
God through the
Yeah,
Ayatollahs.
in a very manipulating way, Ayatollah actually deceived us. He said, before the revolution, he said, we just will go for people's opinion and voting, and we'll ask them to, make a choice between kingdom or Islamic Republic. But he subtly after that himself said he goes for the Islamic Republic. In other words, put the words in the mouth of people. And also did a whole lot of ugly things. And eventually it was established, for Islamic Republic.
So he lied to the people of Iran about
He
what his
lied,
plans were.
absolutely. The one of the reason I became an opposition, even in the time, in the span of 6 months, and like many others, we just discovered his lies and big lies. One of them was that he wouldn't take any political position, and no clergies would take any political position because Iranian had already experienced the chaos that clergies created at the end of the Qajar dynasty in Iran. So they didn't trust them, and that's why he promised Iranian. But after just taking over, and he denied everything, and not only became a leader a political leader, but um, passed a resolution in a subtle way that he wouldn't be questioned. He has absolute authority.
We have this saying in English that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Do you think Ayatollah Khomeini had a view that power would corrupt?
It doesn't matter for religious leaders. That's my take, after living with them and many years of study. The corruption in Islam isn't called corruption. It's legitimate. So they know for the sake of Islam, you can corrupt others, you can steal from others for the improvement of Islam, for the spread of Islam. So obviously, we can hear clearly now from Ayatollah Khomeini. He says that where we use taqiyya, that convenient lying and deception against the Western countries. So he knew that, and in his own Risala, in his own book, he had written this, that even deceiving Sunnis is legitimate, deceiving non-Muslim is legitimate. So I guess he knew that corruption for the sake of Islam and for establishing Islamic government is okay.
The Iranian Revolution gave power to Shia Islam. What's the difference between Shia and Sunni Islam?
When it comes to radicalism, really, there is no any difference, because Quran is the same, Allah is the same, Prophet is the same. But there are some differences in leadership. Like in Sunni, the leadership is not linked to divinity, but leadership in Shia they call them all pure, they are sinless, and therefore the authority becomes divine. You do not reject. If you criticize the leader, you may get death sentence and imprisonment, torture. And also there are some slight differences in praying and commenting on the verses of the Quran. In Sunni, they go for ijma. Many leaders come together, they decide on one issue. But in Islam, leadership, is centralized, and one leader can decide everything. You see that in Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini has power to ask the president to step down and, to say yes to America or Israel, or no to Israel and America, and continue the war. So that's the kind of differences between Sunni and Shia.
They call him the supreme leader, don't they? The chief Ayatollah, who basically controls the government.
Yes, everything. Yeah, he's in charge of everything, and everybody, either government or judiciary system, are all under his authority. He's able to cancel. He's able to ask someone to step down and replace the person.
So you mentioned that hostility to Israel was one of the original motivations for Ayatollah Khomeini and the revolution. Has Iran been consistently hostile to Israel since the revolution up to the present day?
The government, yes. When I was part of the system in Iran, that was the overriding focus of Ayatollah Khomeini, that Israel should be wiped out as soon as possible. And for that, and I was actually partly in some of the discussions, that they said that they wouldn't be able to wipe out Israel from Jews and capture Israel and make it a central political state for Islamic world, namely Shia, unless they reach the highest level of power for army. And they were always arguing that in that time while I was there. So they were always eager, and that, to capture Israel, and that was the priority for Ayatollah Khomeini. And also this Ayatollah Khomeini has always consistently spoken about that. If you remember that years ago, it possibly was in 2015, he says Israel will come to its end in 25 years. So he was always persistent, for this belief. And that's a spiritual and political diet, for the system in Iran.
And what about before the revolution in Iranian culture? What is the attitude to Jews? Are they respected? Or what does ordinary kind of traditional Iranian culture think about the Jews?
I didn't hear really. I can't remember hearing somebody saying that we should respect, Israel, despite knowing that our king, accepted Israel as a legitimate country. But there was no also louder voices saying that we should go and capture Israel. And believe it or not, when I was a young lad, I didn't know actually that many of our fundamental Islamists were fighting side by side Yasser Arafat and others against Israel. And that only became known to me, clear to me, just a couple of years before the revolution. And so but rank and file people among communities, the word Jew and Christianity was not accepted well. I mean, I know that I have come from a society that the word Jew and Christian were used as swear words, We didn't hear from anybody to punish us and tell us you should not use that. So the mindset was still there, the hatred toward Jews and Christianity in particular, toward the Jews. But it was just became very, very obvious after the revolution that not only Jews are unclean, but we have a responsibility to clean the world from that uncleanness and destroy them and kill them.
So why did you flee Iran and leave the revolution behind?
Well, as I mentioned to you, just in a few months' time after the revolution, I discovered that Ayatollah lied to people, and also clergies were really trying to silence anybody who was asking them that you had promised us not to grab any political position. And also the second thing was that Ayatollah was so eager to send the entire money of the country to Palestinians and to Syria and to fight against Israel and capture it. And then Iran was disconnected totally in that time from the West, whereas the economy was dependent on the Western economy. And so the country was getting poorer and poorer. Our children didn't have medicine, especially our little children were dying. So that caused the, problem inside the country. And so some of us said, look, we also hate Israel, but unless you make your own people, powerful and strengthen them, you won't be able to go and capture Israel with weaker nation, And so, but they were just crazy, and he just thought that in a few years' time, Israel, will come to an end, and so that was the tension. It started from there, and especially we saw the attitudes of clergy. So I was even one of them initially, one of the three invited to start the Revolutionary Army. I was going to be actually one of these, leaders, over 30, army commanders who were killed by Israel. I was going to be one of them. But that tension, that opposition didn't allow me to go there. I'm really thankful to the Lord. So what happened, I even left the capital city, Tehran, and went to my hometown. I really wanted to fully, stay away from clergies because they grabbed the power in everywhere. Even the interim prime minister was crying. He was louder. He was saying that the sword's only handle is in my hand. The edge of sword is in the hands of mullahs. They are not allowing us to work. So it was very obvious. And because of that, I left Tehran, went to my hometown. And so the opposition started from there, and it became deeper and deeper. Yeah, they didn't allow me to go in. It was very obvious, they just send a clergy in place on me. I won the election, actually, but they didn't allow me in the day of election. They beat me with chain. I fell unconscious in the street, and nobody was able to touch me. So they were able to create more chaos in the place I was living. But it's still, in many other places, independent won with 88% of people's vote, and one of my colleagues became the president of the country. But Ayatollah lost, his group lost with 2%, and that angered him. And by that time, he himself was the chief commander of the army, being a supreme leader. So he tried to kill the president, plotted 3 times to kill him. Eventually, the president ran away, went to France, and the government was demolished. Some were able to run away, some were killed. I was one of them, put and got a death sentence, waiting on death row. But a couple of my friends, older friends, they put their life in risk. They played some legal games and released me temporarily so I could run away from Iran to Turkey. But the others who were in prison with me, they were all assassinated and killed.
So where did you become a Christian where did you become a Christian?
It was at the end of 1989 that I, after reading the gospel twice, I gave my heart to Jesus in Turkey, in Istanbul, Turkey.
So you were a refugee at that time, looking for a permanent place to live, I suppose.
I was not a legal refugee in Turkey, because what happened, I enrolled in Istanbul University to do my doctorate. Mainly, I really wanted a student visa to live in the country. So I had a student visa. That was my excuse to continue in the university. But I didn't know that was the plan of Jesus. He had planned for me to go through university to open my eyes. The major of my doctorate was about cultures, religions, and philosophies. And there I was amazed by Christian values in comparison with Islam and other world major religions and philosophical beliefs. And then after that, something happened in my life. I had to go to a church and to ask about my business partner who took my money and ran away. He was a Muslim, but the Christians were in contact with him. They were possibly trying to convert him. And so for that reason, I went to the church to ask about him, and they offered their help to me to be able to find him in Germany. So that caused me to be in continual contact with them, and gradually seeing them very nice people, relationally amazing people. So that caused me to listen to their messages in the church and becoming fascinated of the nature of God in the Bible and the way Jesus approaches people. They all really amazed me, and eventually I gave my heart to Jesus in Istanbul, in Turkey.
You've been out of Iran for a long time now. Do you still keep in contact with people inside Iran? Do you have a sense of what's happening in the country?
With a few people, carefully, because it's not easy for them to have chat with me, and especially concerning politics and other things. They expose themselves to risk if they do that. But I have some friends, they call me, we just speak about normal things and not politics and other things. But I'm continually listening to news from inside the Iran and the news from outside the Iran. So I'm fully aware what's happening in Iran.
Now, we hear that Iranians are unhappy with their government. How unhappy are they? And is that most people or just some people?
Most people, Mike. I'm amazed, that even illiterate Muslims hate Ayatollahs. Normally in Islamic countries, uneducated people, illiterate countryside people, they attach themselves to, Ayatollahs, their authorities. But I can tell you, Mark, it's more than 90%. That's my guess. But recently we read that, our Iranians are with Netanyahu, and 60% of Iranians do not want to identify with Islam anymore. And I tell you, Mark, I have spoken to illiterate Iranian people, and even they call themselves proudly Islamic, and they are questioning, the Islamic system in Iran. They don't do anything with Ayatollahs. Not only that, they are wishing the death of all Ayatollahs, and they are saying that Iran doesn't need any Ayatollah anymore.
Oh, that's very deep. So you said that they're with Netanyahu. Do Iranians support Israel and its leaders? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Netanyahu really played a significant role in the life of Iranian. You see, this man wanted really to make his clear, strategies plan clear to Iranians, and therefore he opened a direct line, connecting directly with Iranians. Iranian can call him and talk him, and since 2 years ago, he has always offered his help to Iranians in any way. Iranians are suffering a lot. Farmers are suffering because of the lack of water inside the country, and Netanyahu and his friends are giving, ideas to Iranian how to provide, waters for their farming. And Netanyahu continually has been telling Iranians, you are the best friend for us. We just want to take our friendship, bring our friendship back, the friendship we had in the time of great kings Cyrus and Darius, in the time of the, previous king, and to become friend. Israel is not your enemy. Israel is not the killer of, children. Iranian regime is the killer of children. And Iranians also discovered that in the last several years, that they even poisoned the girls' schools, and many girls died because they didn't want girls to go to school, especially the protests started several years ago by girls in Iran. And so they have become, predominantly, pro-Israeli. And I can't name the name to you, Mark. And I heard from those people who were radical in Iran, now they are supporting Israel. They told me that now we understand that Israel is innocent in comparison with the cruelty this Iranian vicious government is doing.
It's amazing that you're saying that a majority of Iranians are pro-Israel at this time. That's incredible. If Iranians dislike their government so much, why don't they just change their government?
They have paid a big price, but they have been actually paying. Imagine that every year thousands of them are killed and taken to prison, tortured and killed. They are continuing that. I mean, I suppose the rank and file of Iranians are not coming to their streets because they have seen the viciousness of government. They are so cruel. They do not have any compassion toward Iranians, and we have been hearing from the leaders that are saying that Iran is not the first priority for them. Islam is the first priority. And so many people are still afraid to come, but this situation is not going to keep them quiet, because the situation is getting really dire, very bad. And now even, the lack of water inside the country, electricity is disconnected continually, and people are losing their businesses. So the government is not going to survive. Eventually, all Iranians are going to come to the street and protest against the government and overthrow the government.
So should the people that are in power in Iran, should they be frightened about what's going to happen to them if there's a revolution, another anti-revolution?
Yeah, actually, in the last 3 days, I heard from the Iranian leaders are saying that we are ready for martyrdom. They never spoke it like this. That they are just trying to bring back, the martyrdom of Hussein. They are, similarizing themselves to what Hussein did. And I heard yesterday and the day before, the new commanders of the army are saying that we are ready, to sacrifice ourselves just in the way Hussein did. So they don't have any place to run away. They have realized that now, that even they cannot trust their beautiful friend, Putin or China, because they have realized no matter who Putin is, but at least he has put his country in the first priority, and he can, surrender. If Ayatollah goes to, Russia, Putin can, easily give him to the, authorities in the West, or at least to the court, United Nations court. And so they don't have any place to run away, and they understand now that, they have lost their powers, and they don't have any power to fight with Israel, and their proxies have gone, and almost all the world now is against them. But they're just possibly just breathing their, last moments, and possibly are ready for, martyrdom.
Do you think they believe their own propaganda? I mean, are the leaders totally convinced of this ideology that they've been preaching for so long?
Could you please repeat it, Mark?
Do you think the leaders of Iran really still believe all the things they're saying? Do they still believe in
They have
promoting?
no choice to believe. They have no choice to believe, because they, for decades, they fed Iranians that's the right ideology, and
Right.
Islamic way is the right. But now it is too late for them to get their words, back. They are just prideful people. They are still pressing on, but I don't believe they themselves believe it, because they are so corrupt people. In the last 45 years, they stole trillions of dollars of people. And many Iranians are saying that they themselves do not believe in Islam, but they are just trying us to believe in Islam. So many Iranians have discovered that, and also we see from their own attitudes that Islam really is no longer a refuge for them. I mean, even for Ayatollahs. Right. Imagine that some Ayatollahs now are speaking in favor of the kingdom in Iran. And also, recently in the last 10 years, I should say that there are some Islamic scholars and Ayatollahs are saying that they no longer can trust this Quran in their hand. They just use some legitimate things. They say that, Sunnis corrupt the Quran, and the true Quran will be brought by, the 12th Imam Mahdi. Imagine that you're saying that the Quran in my hand is not... Yeah, it's the corrupt one. So you understand that if the Quran is corrupt, then you don't have a sound Islamic political philosophy or social philosophy for living. So many people, also rank and file people, have discovered that they no longer believe in Islam.
It's a great theological crisis, isn't it? Because the revolution promised success and greatness and grandeur for Iran, but it's delivered disaster, poverty, and pain. And that's, I can understand from what you're saying that the leaders are doubling down on their ideology because they've got nowhere else to go, and they have to really fear their own people. Why do you think the Israelis and the Americans bombed Iran? Was that necessary? What was the point of doing that?
While I was, as I mentioned to you, they just, Israel, the destruction of Israel was the first priority, and Israel realized that right from the beginning. Israel knew its enemies, and for that reason had to search and be aware of it. But Israel was unable to convince, Western countries, in particular America. So what happened? October 7, caused Israel, to have words for the Western countries and convince America to stand behind Israel, and Israel has right to protect itself. And Iranians gradually saw that the problem is not Israel. The major problem is the Ayatollahs inside the country, and therefore Iranians, lost trillions of dollars, their entire wealth to Ayatollahs, to the Ayatollahs' proxies like terrorist Hamas and Hezbollah. And Iran became poorer and poorer, lost everything. The economy, imagine that Iran was the most powerful country, economically speaking, in the Middle East, now is the least of all neighboring countries. They have gone, improved, but Iran has gone backward. So Iranian lost everything. They even lost, their cultural heritage. They saw that how these mullahs are very disrespectful toward their own culture, and therefore they wanted anybody to come and destroy those mullahs. But when they saw that Israel is innocent, Israel is able to protect itself from its internal and external enemies, and when they realized that they gave the whole money to Palestinians, and Hamas, constructed, underground channels with the millions of Iran, and Hezbollah, they just emptied the pocket of Iranian, and therefore Iranian said, "Oh, anybody comes and destroys this government will be fine. Why not Israel?" Now they are calling Israel just like a father to Iranians, a compassionate father to Iranians, helping Iranians to be, free of this despotic religion.
We hear that some Middle Eastern states, like Saudi Arabia, are very happy that Israel bombed Iran. What is the Saudis' view on this conflict between Israel and Iran?
Well, if I was Saudi Arabia, I would be very happy, because I am a witness myself, while I was part of them, that Saudi Arabia was in the list for Iranians to occupy Saudi Arabia. So it was, Saddam Hussein, Ayatollah wanted to get rid of Saddam Hussein to capture, Iraq, because majority are Shia. And then Saudi Arabia is the center, is the motherland of Iran. It should be in the hands of Shiite people. And it's in the hand of Saudis. And so Saudi really was part of the plan for Iranian Ayatollahs to capture Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia knew that right from the beginning. And so that's why Saudi Arabia was always searching, for a way to see Ayatollahs to disappear from Iran. And now it's a good time for Saudi Arabia, even though they do not, make their voices louder, apparently. But I guess that they are very happy what's happening to Ayatollahs in Iran.
Can I ask you something about an Australian Iranian woman? There was a report in the media recently about Tina Kordrostami, who was a councillor in Sydney with the Greens, and she quit her party, the Greens, and she'd been attending rallies for the Palestinian Action Group each week in Sydney. She's very concerned about what she says is the genocide of Palestinians and wanted to support the protest. But she realized that at the protest, there were people from the Iranian regime attending. They were holding up banners showing the pictures of the supreme leader and promoting the official Iranian government ideology. And she said that she stopped attending those protests. She said, out of fear. She said, out of fear, I stopped attending. Why would she be so afraid of a protest where there are people from the Iranian regime present?
I honestly do not know the details about her experience. I mean, she has said that, some intimidation, stalking, and other things, online and personally. And they are good excuses. But I don't understand that if you're a member of Green and also a pro-Palestinian, why you're, getting intimidation from other people. Maybe she was, speaking out louder in her party. And I saw somewhere, so they are in themselves reasons, for her to be ignored.
She'd been speaking up for the women in Iran, the Woman Life Freedom Movement. And
she has been speaking for that?
She had been, yeah. And she persuaded the Greens to oppose the Iranian government's treatment of women in Iran.
Then so that's a good excuse. Actually, that's a good excuse for others to intimidate her.
Yeah. She was also disappointed with the Greens because she wants them not just to criticize Israel, but to condemn the Iranian regime and what she says their actions over 40 years. She said she's been trying to educate the Greens about the Iranian regime, but they wouldn't listen to her. They refused to condemn the Iranian regime. Why do you think, this is a big question, but why do you think some Western people refuse to listen to voices like your voice or Kordrostami's voice about Iran? Why do people refuse to condemn the Iranian government in this time?
It's just the ideological trend, Mark, and I wish she was able to understand this right from the beginning. She's crying the painful experience of tyranny, but she's also met with indifference, sadly. It's a sad story in Western countries, in Australia, that some of our politicians do not know the difference between the ethics of terrorists and the ethics of freedom lovers. Really, this is a clear sign of the failure of civilization in Western countries, including Australia, and her cry is coming from there.
Yes, she's trying to tell Australians that the Iranian regime is a terrorist regime that hates life and is very destructive, and she's finding that people won't listen. She said, my pain has become inconvenient. I was really struck by that word, my pain, because I hear a lot of Iranians speaking like that, actually. What is the pain that she's speaking about? I mean, you think of Australians who live fairly comfortable lives without really threats to their very life and their freedom. What does an Iranian speaking about her pain, what is that pain that she's speaking about? What does that look like for a person?
I really identify with her. I was very close to cry when I read that in the article. And Australia has been profoundly generous to us, to her family, to my family, and to the family of many Iranians and other refugees. They welcomed us. We were wandering people. We didn't have any place to go. And Australia welcomed us to come here to enjoy the freedom and justice with Australian here. We understand that this freedom is sacred. We understand that this freedom is worth dying for. We understand that. We also understand, Mark, that if Australia falls into the agents of tyranny and they make their root in this country, and then there will not be a place for us, for our children, and for our family here. We worry that if Australia falls into their hands, then where should we take our children and go and run away? There is no any other place. And that's why we are so eager, to pay the price for this freedom, no matter the cost. So this is painful when you see that you appreciate freedom and justice in this country, and you appreciate the civilization in this country, and you want to defend it. But there are some people in Australia, some politicians, who ignore you. Not only they ignore you, silence you, they just think that your place is not in Australia. So that's the painful thing. I have paid myself lots of price for speaking out and defending freedom in Australia, in Western countries. I was a lecturer in the university. My life here in University of Technology, my life was made hell by radical Islamist students and socialists there, and eventually I had to lose my job in the university there. So we understand that. I understand her pain. I identify with her, that your heart is going for freedom, and you are truly experiencing pain to see some Australian do not know what freedom is. Not only that, they stand against you, and that is very painful. And sometimes I have cried for that. I have prayed a lot to Jesus and prayed for this. Lord, we have come here. We appreciate this freedom here so much. Just help us, give us energy, give us power to stand for it without any compromise.
I want to ask you a question about the future of Iran. Do you have hope for Iran? Because they've had 45 years of pain.
I do. Even I tell you, Mark, I was asked lots of questions, even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that is this going to continue in Iran? I said, no, radicalism doesn't continue in Iran. We had this experience in the last centuries that Iranians eventually rose and they couldn't tolerate them and they had to change their mannerism. Imagine that radical Islamists left their radicalism and announced themselves as king, in the time of Safavids and before that. So radicalism doesn't work among Iranians because their culture has a significant part, that it doesn't walk hand in hand with Islam, and especially when Islam is against that culture. So, now we have come to this stage that Ayatollahs have destroyed life in every way in Iran. It is hard to, silence Iranian. These Ayatollahs are going to come to their end, and Iran is going to be free. And also, this is just a political, social response to you. But being a Christian man, I believe in God. I believe in the prophecies of the Bible. Bible itself, Jeremiah 49 says that he will crush the cruel leaders in Iran, bring back all Iranian, establish his kingdom there. And I see that's happening. I'm so grateful that I'm part of, Iranian movement for freedom.
There is a lot about Persia in the Bible, isn't there? It was the Persian leaders that brought the Jews back out of exile, and there were the wise men, as they call them, the Magi, who were almost certainly Persians, what we'd call Iranians today, who came and were amongst the first of the nations to worship at the feet of Jesus. And it's very moving to think about that heritage. I know Iranians are very proud of their ancient heritage. They see themselves as a people with an amazing history that goes back thousands of years. And I believe I've met so many brilliant Iranians too, very capable people, highly educated, deeply sad for their country, but very, very capable. And I pray and hope, as you say, that Iran will have its day. What can Australian Christians do in the face of all these issues that we've been speaking about? What would you want to say to Australian Christians about these issues in Australia, or also about Iran? What can we do to support the people of Iran at this time?
Australian Christians need to pray for Iran continually and encourage those Iranians who stand for freedom. And I just want to tell here, Mark, after 30 so years studying about all other religions and cultures and, philosophies, there is no any better value than the values of Jesus Christ. I guarantee Australians that Christ is the Savior in every way. He is the beautiful, best model in every way. And we Christians in Australia need to clothe ourselves with the beauties of Christ, not to be afraid to stand for our values. Australian, when they're strong in Australia, that will be encouraging to all Iranians, to people like me. And in itself, it will be a great encouragement to them. But also, we need Australian support. We need Australian voice behind us. You and I have been fighting for more than 3 decades for this. So far I had, experienced 9 terroristic plots and, vicious, attacks from radical Muslims, and that they have invaded my rights in many ways. And I praise God that I was able, by the grace of Jesus, to come to this stage, bravely. And I love to always live as a brave man, as a sincere follower of Jesus Christ. We need really Australian prayers and Australian support in every way, emotional support, social support, words of encouragement and everything.
I think in some ways, Australian Christians need to rediscover Jesus and rediscover the power of the scriptures. I was very moved recently to hear Ayaan Hirsi Ali speaking in London in February. She was a radical Muslim and then became an atheist and then a Christian. And after becoming a Christian, she's discovered that fundamental principles that uphold Western democracies actually are biblical principles.
Amazing.
The reality of sin, for example, has caused Western countries to build in checks and balances, separation of powers. This is a tradition that is based on theological insight about the nature of human beings that comes from the Bible. Anyway, it was very moving to hear her speak.
It is.
And quoting the scriptures. She understood really very, very clearly that the freedoms we enjoy are due to the teachings of the Bible, and what a journey she's been on to get to that point. And I pray that Australian Christians would understand those principles and also stand with the people of Iran and pray for Iran. My hope and vision and dream is that Iran could become a Christian nation that would take the gospel through to Central Asia and across the Middle East. And may God bless Iran. It's certainly a nation that has suffered tremendously. Amen. And its leaders have caused mayhem and destruction. And we should pray for all the amazing work that the Holy Spirit has been doing in the hearts of Iranians, all the visions and dreams and calling to the Lord Jesus that so many have experienced, that this will result in a transformation of the nation of Iran. There's no doubt that this is a time that God is putting his finger on Iran and calling people to himself, calling people to Christ. So it's a great thing to pray into that. Daniel, it's such a joy to speak with you. Thank you for your courage and the clarity that you bring, for the tears that you've wept for your nation and indeed for all of us. And may God bless you and strengthen you and give you more strength for your arm in the years ahead for all that God's asked you to do.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, really. It's a pleasure to be with you always. Thank you.
Great to talk. Thank you.